We're back for your ears only. I'm Melissa Axelbarth.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. We are making sure there are good people on the ground. That was Libya's interim leader Mahmoud Jabril on a delay in moving rebel headquarters to Tripoli until there is sufficient communication and security. Of greater concern were widespread reports of stolen weapons, including shoulder-launched missiles that could threaten Allied military and civilian aircraft. Now this.
I was on the street and everyone started running and screaming away from the World Trade Towers. And then the second one, I just heard a big explosion. It moved everything and it blew our windows out.
It was more than chaotic. People were slamming into each other trying to grab hold of something to get out of the building. People did not know which way to run.
This conflict was begun on the timing and terms of others. It will end in a way and at an hour of our choosing.
As we know from the intelligence gathered following the Osama bin Laden raid, Al-Qaeda has shown an interest in important dates and anniversaries such as 9/11.
The opening montage of 9/11 survivors and witnesses on this show 10 years ago, and Janice Fedorchik, FBI Assistant Director in New York, last week indicating that the terror threat is still there, specifically a credible but uncorroborated tip about an al-Qaeda plot to bomb Washington or New York. Just days earlier, a co-chairman of the 9/11 Commission warned that the U.S. is safer now than in 2001, but not yet as safe as it should be, while the American Civil Liberties Union warned that too many constitutional rights were being sacrificed for security, the efforts towards it, or the illusion of it.
To consider the progress, problems, and prospects in America's war with radical Islamism, for your ears only, we have the same terror expert we turned to before, immediately after 9/11, and at every major milestone since. He's Bruce Hoffman, director of the Center for Peace and Security Studies at Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. But first, some of your views in several recent opinion surveys. Only 43% credit government policies for the fact there's not been another 9/11 magnitude attack. 35% say it's luck. Majority say the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have not reduced the chances of such attacks or actually increased them. Interestingly, while 58% thought the attacks 10 years ago permanently changed the way Americans live, 72% denied such changes in their own lives. Now to Dr. Hoffman. Welcome back to our show.
Thank you very much for having me.
As late as last week, officials were citing documents captured in the killing of bin Laden to explain the latest terror threat. But you say that for too long, Washington dismissed his continuing importance to the threat of al-Qaeda terrorism. Why did that happen?
I think a lot of it was a product of wishful thinking, trying to put him out of our mind since we had so much difficulty in tracking him down and killing him.
Given how the captured documents vindicated your view of OBL's importance to the terror threat from al-Qaeda Central, largely based in Pakistan, how much has it been undermined by his elimination?
Well, it certainly has been significantly undermined by his elimination because that's precisely what the documents seized from his villa in Abbottabad, Pakistan, revealed, is that he was not only still directing and overseeing al-Qaeda's strategy, but in fact he was also micromanaging some of its planned operations and playing a much more dynamic role in its day-to-day running. What I think has been significant is that we followed up the killing of bin Laden with the targeted assassinations of Ilyas Kashmiri, one of the leading up-and-coming figures in al-Qaeda, and most recently with Atiya Abdul Rahman, another key al-Qaeda operative. And I think that sort of trifecta, in essence, has really seriously eroded the group.
What impact do you see on al-Qaeda spin-offs in Yemen, Somalia, Nigeria, and elsewhere, and on the potential lone wolf solo converts who may actually already be in the United States?
That's exactly the problem. Over the past 6 months or so, the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the recently retired director of the National Counterterrorism Center, and the current director of National Intelligence all testified before Congress and said the same thing, that al-Qaeda affiliates or associates such as al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, to an extent al-Shabaab, its East African arm, now pose as great, if not a greater threat to U.S. and international security than the parent organization. So that's one side of the coin of the challenge we now have to deal with. The other side, as you point out correctly, is the lone wolves. I mean, this is precisely the intention and the motivation of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula's now famed English-language radicalization journal, or Journal of Radicalization, Inspire. It's to motivate, to inspire, to animate lone individuals, wherever they are, to engage in acts of violence that are designed to further al-Qaeda's goals, but to do so spontaneously and independently. So we can see that, whereas 10 years ago, in essence, we faced one enemy in one place at one time, and that was al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, that we had to eliminate. We did during Operation Enduring Freedom, or at least expel them from Afghanistan. What we now see are many al-Qaedas in many places and many different individuals being radicalized on their own as well.
Let's look at anti-terror tactics and strategy in the U.S. Is political correctness or election politics keeping the administration from being more outspoken about radical Islam as our enemy, or is it simply being sensitive to American Muslims as our first line of intelligence and defense against domestic plots?
This is an enormously delicate problem, and unfortunately it's one that often gives way to knee-jerk responses, although certain individuals or certain entities may take tremendous satisfaction in saying that Muslims themselves are not doing enough to counter terrorism. Empirically, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, after all, it was Abdul Muttalib, the December 2009 Christmas Day bomber's father, who came to the United States enemy and in essence turned in his son. I mean, it was our problem that we couldn't then track him down. Similarly, in the Washington, D.C. area, it was the parents of 5 individuals from Alexandria, Virginia, who had gone off to fight with the Taliban in Pakistan, to join al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. It was the parents who actually alerted authorities to their disappearance. Similarly, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, it was the parents and the mothers of many young Somali Americans that had been radicalized and recruited into al-Qaeda's East Africa arm, al-Shabaab, who came forward and provided information to the authorities. So I think we have to be very careful. I mean, the Muslim community has been active and, of course, is enormously pivotal to our defenses, and we need to be very careful before casting aspersions or accusing them of not having done enough.
We know airline cockpits are now sealed to prevent skyjacking, but what about scan technology and procedures to keep suicide bombers from boarding in the first place, especially new questioning of all passengers, at least briefly, to detect suspicious reactions? Can TSA personnel be trained to really tell, or is this just a way of giving them a cover for illegal profiling?
Even 10 years after September 11th, 2001, and the vast improvement that we've seen in aircraft security or aviation security, that al-Qaeda and its affiliates and associates have not surrendered their focus on commercial aviation as a target, and that they're constantly seeking to evolve new and more insidious ways to take down aircraft. The underwear bomb that I just described from December 2009 is one example. The bombs exactly a year ago that were hidden in printer ink cartridges and sent on cargo planes is yet another. And then just in the past few months, we've had the Transportation Security Administration issue a warning of the latest acronym that we have to now contend with in the war against terrorism, or the latest threat as well, but it's a very strange acronym, SIIEDs, Surgically Implanted Improvised Explosive Devices. So what we see is this is a never-ending struggle. What concerns me, though, is that rather than improving and substituting new and novel and more effective means of detecting these threats, we just seem to be adding layer upon layer of security without any strategic sense of where it's leading.
Bruce Hoffman is director of the Center for Peace and Security Studies at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service.
Next, resilience and recovery for your ears only.